Hi guys, so the future Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves, was in Davos recently where she spoke to Bloomberg TV. The Labour shadow cabinet member was asked about the questions businesses in Britain put to her ahead of the general election. Is it closer ties with the EU or something else? Rachel was quick to respond with something else. She reinforced the point also that her party has been saying for some time that the referendum result was to leave the European Union and that a Labour government would not undo that, and that the UK will not rejoin the single market, the customs union, or restore freedom of movement. While she's speaking the truth, the fact that she's timid when it comes to criticising Brexit is frustrating. Have a listen.
So what are investors asking you? What's the question you get asked the most? Is it closer ties with the EU or is it something else?
Number one thing is stability and consistency, a clear mission for an incoming government that they can get behind, and then sticking with that plan rather than the chopping and changing, the chaos and the confusion that, frankly, too many businesses have had to get used to under Conservative governments these last 14 years. And, of course, there are specific things on skills, on using the National Wealth Fund that Labour would create to invest alongside businesses and to have closer trading relationships, including with our neighbours in Europe.
So when they ask you whether you'll have a closer relationship with Europe than the current government, what do you tell them?
Well, we accept the result of the referendum, which is almost 8 years ago now. Britain is outside the European Union, the single market, the customs union and free movement, and those things won't change under a Labour government. But we don't think that the deal that the Conservatives secured was the best deal available, and we would build on that deal, working with our neighbours and trading partners in Europe to strengthen it in key areas, including for professional services, which were frankly sold down the river in those Brexit negotiations. And we're working with business to establish the priorities for those negotiations.
What negotiations? I hope she's not talking about 2025, because in 2025 there would be a review of the TCA, not a renegotiation. So unless she's talking about bilateral agreements with individual member states, that's a different thing. But I hope she's not talking about the TCA, because that will not be renegotiated in 2025. It will be reviewed. Both sides, the UK government, no longer a Tory government, a Labour government, and the EU will meet and they will review what has went well and what has not gone well. But there will not be a renegotiation. Now, as I said at the beginning, it's frustrating because when Labour are asked this question about Brexit, what they say is always the same thing. The referendum took place, the people voted to leave, we're no longer a member of the European Union, we're no longer a member of the single market, the customs union, freedom of movement has ended. And they rightly say that's not going to change within the next parliament. It's not going to change. But what's frustrating is they don't criticise Brexit. What they try to do is criticise the Tory Brexit. Now, I understand from a political point of view, you need to keep some Brexiteers on board if there are still any Brexiteers who are willing to vote for the Labour Party. You need to keep these people on board, and for some reason you have to avoid criticising Brexit. You can criticise the Tory one. But then she went on to say that we need to build on that. Build on what? It's a disaster. It needs to be scrapped and renegotiated. But you can't do that because the EU is not willing to renegotiate. They have said, look, we've invested a huge amount of time and effort in this TCA. We're not interested in renegotiating, because if you want it renegotiated, then you need to bring something else to the table. Now, some people have mentioned a security agreement. I don't know whether that would be sufficient. But tinkering around the edges is not going to change the reality on the ground. I've said before that if the UK had remained part of the single market, for most people, the impact of Brexit would have been minimal. People would have not really noticed any difference. But being outside the single market is fundamental, and this is the most damaging part of Brexit, along with, of course, the ending of freedom of movement. Now, the only way back in real terms, is, in any real way, is through EU membership. So let's knock on the head this idea of the UK rejoining the single market or just the customs union or something like that. If it wants to be at the table making the decisions, the important decisions, it needs to be a member. If it wants to be in the single market, it needs to go through EU membership first. Now, that's not going to happen in the next parliament. It may not happen in the parliament after that, but you need to be putting down the foundations now. And one of the foundations, of course, is criticising Brexit, saying to the public, this was a mistake, being honest with them. Because dancing around this convinces the public that something can be changed slightly to make it all better, that Brexit can be made to work, but it can't. I hope that when the Labour Party get into power, they will be freer to criticise Brexit. If Keir Starmer has a massive majority, perhaps he will come out and criticise Brexit. He will be protected. That's my hope, that he's being a little bit dishonest now, and that he'll be more honest in the future. It's a possibility. We would prefer our politicians to be honest, of course. This may be a tactic that he's using, or I could be completely wrong. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.